is New Year's Day in the church year, if you will. And perhaps that's a good practice because it reminds us that we are not living our lives according to a cultural or societal calendar. It isn't the whole story. It's where we take our cue from, which is different from all the cultures around the world. If you go into the Middle East, it's not 2019, it's a different year. If you go to China, it's a different year again. And they have their own New Year's days. And so, in a sense, the spiritual calendar then has its own year. And we're renewing ourselves in a new spiritual year today. And it tells us that there's something bigger going on with our lives. That it's not about just this little narrow frame, this window of time in which we live our lives. It extends before time and it continues after time. And Advent and Christmas are seasons that we come together as a society, as a people, as a spiritual community, to listen again to a foundational and formative story. This is a story, for good or ill, that has impacted billions of peoples, when you think about it, down through the centuries. It has mystical and mythological influence, and it underpins the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives. We may not be conscious of that, but we have grown up, most of us at least, in a Christian environment. And so that story is playing in the background, whether you've noticed it or not. And you may not even be aware of the influences that it has on you. It gives meaning to our existence, our purpose, our way of thinking, of being in the world, how we act, and even how we feel at any given time. And in our final 9-week group last Tuesday, we talked about what things or events were sacraments for us. What would we consider a sacrament in our lives? And we said that what we were doing in the room, sharing our stories and our experiences, was in fact a sacrament for us. Because it connected us to our true self. We had quite an emotional gathering last Tuesday morning. It was very powerful, very touching. And so it connected us to ourselves, to one another, and in that sense then, to the divine reality of our lives. And this story that we celebrate during Advent Christmas can be said to be a sacrament for humanity, for us. It can be. It doesn't mean it is necessarily. So it might be helpful to give a definition of what a sacrament is. One definition says, the sacraments are efficacious signs of grace, by which divine life is dispensed to us. The visible rites by which the sacraments are celebrated signify and make present the graces proper to each sacrament. And I realize that's a little bit technical. But it says they're efficacious signs. They are signs that bring about an effect which we would call connection or grace. Another way to say that is that they're revelations or they're experiences that make the divine real and connect us to the divine. We feel different and we understand ourselves differently because of the visible encounter with a person, a place, a ritual, an experience, or a thing. A poem or a song can be a sacrament. That's why we can listen to them, recite them, sing them over and over, and they don't get old because there's some energy that comes to us in doing that. Sacraments are like that. There's an energy present. We can be sacraments. Our words can be sacraments. And perhaps more than anything, our listening can be a sacrament for someone also. Or just our very presence. So without saying or doing anything this morning, as you are here, your presence can be a sign and a symbol. It can have an effect on the people around you. Wouldn't it be sad if you were the only one who showed up this morning? But you have these other people around you, and by their presence, they are a sacrament for us. And so then we come to the realization that we can be a sign or a symbol for something much deeper than what we normally think about ourselves. We can have a powerful impact on other people's lives. It can even feel mystical or magical. It can change people's lives. It can be an intervention that can be powerful and healing. We have this power. And so the sign can be a portal or a doorway into a more meaningful connection with our own story. Because we're always changing that story. We're always adding and subtracting. And how we interact with one another changes the story for us. In a sense, it has the power to unravel and heal the knots that we have developed in the thread of our own life. All of those places where we're caught. It can help to unravel them. And it can be a saving grace. It can be a moment of rediscovering our faith, of renewing our hope, of reclaiming peace, or of restoring love. And these four things, faith, hope, peace, and love, are the themes that we find that go through this Advent season and go through the story also of Advent and Christmas. What the story, in effect, if we kind of pull back and take the bigger vision of things, the big picture, what the story says is that a light appeared in our world that banished the darkness. This light was, in fact, the light of the world. It's what the world was actually made up of. And it can also be interpreted to mean that it's a light that gives illumination. It's the light that explains. It sheds meaning on the world for us. And the story also says that this light came into the world through a very simple human being, a Jewish woman named Mary, of humble birth and status, whose cooperation and yes to the divine gave birth to a human named Jesus, who embodied this light in all ways, fully. And so we can only assume then that this light vibrated at a very high frequency in every cell of his body. That there was a clear understanding that he had of his life, of his purpose, of what was going on. That he had insight, that he had intuition. And that he radiated this light out, and that it affected people. There was a transmission of presence, of love, of the divine, when people encountered him. And so we would say that he was a clear, unobstructed radiance of love. And the message was also clear that the darkness could not overcome this light. It will never overcome that light. And equally importantly, the message was not just about this particular man and woman who gave birth to him, but it was a message for the Jewish and Gentile world of that time about every human being. Their story was humanity's story. And if that's true, then it's also our story. We too are the light of the world, meant to be radiant lights shining out divine love. The power of mythology connects us with our own story. It gives us clarity and purpose to answer the deepest human questions that we encounter in our own lives, in our experience, in our time, and it fulfills our deepest needs. The light came to give us perfect sight, to put everything, in a sense, in order, in plain sight for us to understand. And as we begin this new year, marked by this first Sunday of Advent, you could say that we are already anticipating the year of 2020. And what is 2020 in terms of sight? It's perfect sight. And so for the last few weeks, I've really been feeling this call to perfect sight. And during our 9-week program, we came to perhaps a clearer understanding of what the Christ light actually means. The Christ is just another name for everything and everyone. The divine, that's present everywhere for us to see. And the times that we are living in require that we be clear in our understanding of what the truth is about the light, who we are, and how we are to respond to these challenging times. But it starts always in consciousness. It starts with clear and perfect vision, our spiritual insight. And of course, this is often symbolized by the third eye, not our two natural eyes. So we're seeing from one point, we're not seeing from a dualistic world. We no longer rely on human seeing, but on revelation that's being given to us internally. We don't rely on a split mind of right and left hemispheres that are sometimes confused or even in conflict. But we rely on the singular chamber of an awakened, fearless heart. That's the clear vision and sight of the heart. We must have an alternative source for our fearlessness and our courage in taking on the world. We have to tap into the light that is actually within us in order to be expressions of that light. Otherwise, every time we encounter the dark, we will shrink back in fear, won't we? And yet we are meant to shine our light into the darkness. The darkness is the one that should be afraid of us, because we're the ones that are going to overcome it. We're going to transmute it. We're going to transform it. It's like when you go into a dark room with a candle. What happens? The darkness is overcome, overtaken by the light. And our mere presence in the world, when we are connected to the light that is within, has the power to overcome the darkness around it. It's a perfect metaphor. Do you understand that the light has already won the battle with the darkness? Jesus said, in effect, I have overcome the world. The light has overcome the darkness. All of that is meant to reassure us that we are on a spiritual path, and in a sense, our victory is assured. We don't have to be ambivalent about that or fearful. And the light is a real energy and presence that resides within us as our very essence, who we are. If you think back to the 60s, you were probably singing songs about being starlight. And that's true. We are starlight, but we're far more than starlight too. We are a great spiritual light, as Charles Fillmore, the founder of Unity, once wrote about, and he called it substance that undergirds everything. It's the very fabric out of which this universe is made, and it is a substance of light. It's a field of energy that we exist in. And we need to become familiar with the light within and its power. When we have learned to hold the light, it becomes possible for us to help others. Part of waking up is coming to the realization of how powerful we actually are, and learning to utilize the power that we have for good. When we become conscious of being the light, we simply allow it to shine. We just let it be and shine. We react very differently to the world then. We hold space for people to know and express themselves as the light that they are. And we live in a time when the call to be the light is becoming more dramatic every day. To be the light calls us to give up our sense of deficiency if we're living with a sense of deficiency about who we are. There are two realities that are presenting themselves in our experience for us to choose from. One is the world of craziness and deficiency, of fear, of lack, of dependency, and adherence to the herd mentality. It's an unconscious viewpoint that is giving us lots of evidence that it is very real and complete and concrete. It's palpable. You can feel this energy of fear and lack. And it seems very real, doesn't it? But it requires waking up from that hypnosis, because that's what it is. It's a trance. And choosing to experience a different reality that is based on the spiritual light that is within us, and that can inform our choices. And perhaps it's wise for us to remember the axiom, garbage in, garbage out. What are we taking in? What are we listening to? What are we watching that tilts us to one reality or the other? We can find evidence for either reality, and it comes down to where we put our focus. Because we're addicted, we're conditioned to this first reality, the fake reality, if you will. Where we look and where we put our mind's attention is up to us, because attention follows our intention. And if we keep looking at the negative, it will become our reality. We know that. We know the power of the mind. That's all part of the unity teaching. And so we need to start seeing what is not so obvious, what is at play at the subtle level. And it takes something as simple as closing our eyes and going within and reaching for that light, sensing it, opening up to the possibility of having an experience of it. It is, in a sense, another parallel dimension in which we can live our lives, where there already is wholeness, there already is abundance, there is power, there is healing, there is this divine light at the center of who we are. It's often referred to in the Gospels as the kingdom of God or the reign of God. If we are aligned with that, we see evidence for its reality all around us. If we're looking for it, we'll find it. But if we're not giving ourselves a chance to even look, then we're not going to find. Simple as that. And yet both of these realities coexist around us at the same time. Which one is more real is up to us. We get to make the choice. And Advent is a time then for us to make that choice. It's, in a sense, the tradition from which we've come, saying, you need time out to do this. And nature is giving us all of its help. It's darker, the days are shorter. Take time to go inward. Take time to discover the light within. And so next Friday evening, we have a very special event here. Marlene and Angelica and myself will be hosting it. And I want to invite you to it as our effort, if you will, to get us in this place of looking inward and of discovering the power and the presence that is within. It's a time of special healing. It's a time of focusing on the light. It coincides with the solstice, if you will. We're doing it a little bit earlier. But of going in to connect in the darkness within with the light that wishes to transform us into beings of hope, faith, of peace, joy, abundance, all of those things that we all long for. So I hope you can join us and that you can be nourished by our time together as you are this morning, so that the light can really radiate from us, because we know that the world needs us to step up at this time.